Hi, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining. I am Toby Spry. I'm a partner with PwC in our cybersecurity, privacy, and forensics practice. I focus on helping clients with their privacy and information governance programs. I'm excited to have with me here today Kabir Barday, who's the CEO and founder of OneTrust, which was recently awarded America's fastest growing private company by Inc. magazine. So with that, Kabir, you want to do a little bit of a quick intro and background on yourself and the company?
Yeah, thanks, Toby. My name is Kabir. I'm the CEO of OneTrust. My background is technical. I have a computer science degree from right here in Atlanta at Georgia Tech. And I hold a Fellow of Information Privacy with the IAPP, the highest designation they have for a privacy professional. And I'm involved on the advisory boards of a lot of the different industry organizations that focus on trust, like the Cloud Security Alliance, the Future of Privacy Forum, the IAPP, and these types of groups.
Excellent. Thanks, Kabir. So today, I think what we want to cover with the group is really to focus our discussion on how companies can deliver trust to its various stakeholders. Really thinking about how do we do that with different constituents, whether that be with consumers, with employees, with regulators, various different constituents. But how do we do that in today's world, right? A very evolving sort of landscape with regards to new and emerging regulations, continued change and upheaval in digital technologies and the like. And so we really want to focus on, how do companies deliver trust to those constituents with a particular focus on privacy, security, and data governance. And so from an agenda standpoint, we're really going to cover off on three main areas. So what is trust? So we'll define a little bit more as to what is trust and what this new category is in the marketplace. Then we're going to drill a little bit down into what is data trust. So focusing more on data trust as we'll talk, trust can be a much broader sort of spectrum of consideration. So drilling into what do we mean when we say data trust and what does that mean to the marketplace? And then last, we'll talk a little bit about how trust can lead to both value creation as well as risk reduction. So understanding, how companies can really drive value from trust and not just looking at it through the risk management or compliance sort of lens. So with that, we'll jump right in. This is going to be more of a fireside chat Q&A session where I'm going to ask Kabir a series of questions and we'll go from there. So Kabir, I guess to start, as I mentioned earlier, obviously OneTrust was recently named the fastest growing private company in America. Largely driven by the pioneering software that you all have brought to the marketplace in this new category, right? This new category of trust. So can you maybe start off for the audience and talk a little bit about, what do we mean when we say trust? What does this category actually entail? And what should the audience be thinking about when they see this sort of moniker of trust, if you will?
Yeah, it's interesting. The story of trust for me really started when I was thinking about privacy. And actually, Toby, you know the story well. You were a big part of that inspiration. I was still at my day job at VMware at the time, several years ago, and I came to a session you were speaking at in town and heard you talk about privacy. And it was just so fascinating and interesting and timely of a topic. And over the years, as we've grown OneTrust, it's become so clear that privacy is a piece of a bigger equation of trust. And trust matters today, number one, because the millennial generation, the Gen Z, they've been shown to make buying decisions based on trust. Companies are also starting to see that they can differentiate based on trust. And you can increase the speed of your sales cycle, decrease the length of your contract negotiation. You can have all sorts of better loyalty, better data collection, better personalization. If you can be that trusted brand, consumers are willing to give their data to because they know you're going to protect it. Now, the challenge becomes we keep using this word trust, but it's this like ambiguous thing. And it's also like saying privacy, which when you look at it from a consumer perspective, it means something different to everybody. And trust is the same. And so what's been really interesting in the market is watching this evolve. Like you talked about, evolve into a new category of how enterprises manage trust. And there's an industry analyst, IDC, that came out recently and put together what they call their Future of Trust framework. It includes managing your risk, managing your information security, your compliance, your ethics, your social responsibility, and your privacy, and all of that rolls into trust. Now, there are a lot of pieces that go into that. In a big segment of that is what we call data trust. And I think the main theme of today. And data trust is really a subset of that bigger picture of trust, which is privacy, security, data governance. And what we've seen when you really think about a modern company and how they build their IT stack. I mean, there's a pretty common, ubiquitous set of technologies now. You kind of use Salesforce for your customers, kind of use Atlassian for your R&D, Workday for your HR. But there's this void in what is the technology that helps you be accountable and embed trust in your organization. And that's what we're on a mission to develop at OneTrust.
Yeah, thanks, Kabir. I think that, that's certainly just from my own perspective, right? Serving clients in the marketplace and what we're seeing more broadly as an organization. I'd fully agree and just, validate everything you've said there. I think as, having been in privacy, as you kind of alluded to earlier in the intro, for quite a number of years, right? Have sort of seen this evolution, if you will, as organizations had, we're focusing more on strictly sort of compliance type programs, right? Really dealing with regulatory compliance, sort of almost a whack-a-mole approach, right? Things like GDPR come out, they deal with that, then CCPA, but it's really much more of a compliance-driven approach. And as we're seeing more and more sort of demand from various constituents, whether that be from consumers, whether that be from shareholders, whatever it is, employees, exactly, all those different angles and different constituents looking for companies to actually do more and provide more with that data. But in doing that, there's also an understanding and recognition that with that comes sort of a high level of expectation around how you're properly handling and managing that data that goes beyond just to your point, the sort of baseline table stakes sort of legal compliance definition. And so we're starting to see this new expectation, if you will, that organizations need to go beyond just the regulatory compliance sort of lens or sort of that table stakes, right? And really need to be thinking more about how do we demonstrate that trust with our various constituents, because there is an understanding and more of an understanding than there ever was with regards to the amount of data and the types of data processing that's taking place in the background at organizations.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I'm glad you brought up that that point about compliance, because what's interesting in how both you and I describe this kind of category of trust is neither of us talked about GDPR 4% fines, right? Because that's not the point anymore. And sure, there's a baseline of compliance that kind of, is a starting point, but it's like you and I talked about, it's about your customers want this, your employees want this. That's why the regulations exist. It's not just regulation for the sake of regulation. And you can differentiate now. You couldn't differentiate 10 years ago on this stuff, but today you can, and that's what's exciting about the work you and I are doing.
Yeah, totally agree. And so going, taking that thought process then a little bit further, right? Pulling that thread a bit. So now that we've sort of defined trust, provided a bit of an overview of what it means, what this new sort of category is, can you maybe talk a little bit about technology, right? Obviously, you guys are a software company and a technology organization, but can you talk a bit about how technology can sort of help companies to better demonstrate trust to their various constituents?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you look at the different kind of pieces of the puzzle in this market, the data trust piece of this is privacy, security, data governance. And then the broader trust can include things like ethics and social responsibility and these types of things. Now, these emerging technologies, they help an organization, number one, find all their data. And I always tell people, when I tell non-technical people that technology can help find all the data, they're shocked. They're like, why? How does a company not know what data they have? And this was the first, when you and I met many years ago, this was the first problem you told me. You were like, companies just don't know what data they have. We need to better map data. And it's like this obvious problem, but it's so complicated to do. So that's a baseline. The challenge with mapping data is you have to do it for different constituents. If you map data for the regulators, there's a different legal process level granularity. Versus if you map it for your business to use the data, you need to almost give them a catalog, and they don't care necessarily about the back end legal stuff. So you have to solve all that. Then you have to be able to analyze all that data in real time against, is this consistent with our policy and data ethics? And then what you need to do is be able to give people access, choice to that data. And so those are the key pieces of the puzzle here. And from a technology perspective, this can be so incredibly valuable if you think about this in the context of trust and value and not just compliance. You think about a platform that manages your data. Remember, there are third parties that have your data. There are contracts that govern that. There are processes, IT systems. It's personal data, non-personal data. Your business is accessing that data for their different business initiatives, their marketing programs. In a technology platform, now you're documenting and inventorying all of that. If you can do that in a single technology platform that has a consistent data model, think about how valuable of a decision-making engine that can be for your board. If you want to go acquire a new company, enter a new market, you just plug in that new market into this decision engine. You can evaluate every contract, data flow, vendor, a system. I mean, it can be so incredible. And so that's really the vision of how technology is going to be able to help in this market.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you you mentioned our earlier discussions, because I think you would agree with me that even though that was many years ago, right? We're still seeing many of the same challenges in the marketplace, right?
Yeah.
Many of our clients, either still don't have a very strong handle on their data footprint, don't have good data hygiene, good data awareness. But where they did that to address a particular compliance obligation, like we said, whether that was GDPR, CCPA, LGPD, whatever it is, it became stale, right? They lacked a lot of the companies that I've engaged and have worked with, even multiple times, whether it was to help them with GDPR and then came back for CCPA and found that, in that time, they never put the actual sort of sustainable compliance, people, process, technology to make sure that remained evergreen, right? That they continued to know what data they had, where that data goes, both internally and externally, how that data is being used. So to your point, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic that, one would have thought, I think, looking back that by now we probably wouldn't be talking about this same challenge, but the reality is companies are still struggling with this, and it's only becoming more difficult as the amount of data that's being collected, right? Yeah. And the pressures to collect more data or to use more data in new ways and create more personalized experiences based on data, that it's becoming harder and harder, frankly, to keep your sort of finger on the pulse of where that information goes and lives within your organization. So I think that's spot on. It's still a very very top of mind issue that we see at our clients. So I totally agree that where I see technology playing a pivotal role, I would say, from both the compliance, but that broader trust and value creation side also lies in this specific area.
Yeah.
So maybe as we talk about trust, I think just pivoting to another question here, it's interesting because PwC conducted a consumer survey fairly recently, and it was an interesting result whereby we found that only 21% of consumers actually reported that they have trust in companies' use of their data. So there's obviously still a pretty substantial gap, right, with respect to where companies are today, at least from what the consumer perception, I will say, is, versus where they probably need to be, at least with regards to building that sort of trust relationship with their consumers and stakeholders. I guess from your perspective, can you talk about maybe some ways that you believe companies can kind of bridge that gap and potentially build that trust or rebuild that trust in certain cases with their consumers and various constituents?
Yeah, and I think it's a great point because frankly, most of the companies you and I probably work with, I mean, the reason they hire us is because they're trying to do the right thing. I mean, they have no intention of doing something nefarious, malicious, or anything down that path. And if they're able to use more data, they're able to build better products and services based on those analytics. They're able to personalize their experiences, which is good for both sides. It's good for the consumers. It's good for employees. It's good for the company. And so the challenge becomes if you don't put guardrails over that initiative of the data collection, then there can start to be unintended consequences. And, are you doing, targeting for promotions that are based on demographics that maybe reinforce social and economic divides? Maybe you're doing, certain types of personalization that might end up showing an ad for some medical condition on somebody's computer in the middle of their office while they're doing a WebEx presentation. And it's like all these unintended things. Those are just simple examples. I always tell people, like, if you just think about your Google history, would you want that being public? Just what you've searched for, right? And so you're one data breach away from those things. So the key is, how do we help companies think one level deeper about, yes, it's okay to personalize. Everybody likes that. But what is the bare minimum amount of data you need to accomplish those requirements? For the data you're collected, are you storing it for just the minimum amount of time as well? Because if there is a breach, there's less risk then. And are you being transparent about how you're using it? Are you collecting one piece of data and then using it for another reason that they didn't know, right? Maybe now they're automatically in the back end disqualified for a loan because of something you told another company that they bought data from over here, right? It's like these bizarre, unintended, out of context issues that start to happen that have a real impact on people's lives. It's this digital to physical connection that's really the problem, because the digital environment has an impact on people's ability to buy a house, to have the right relationships, to move to where they want, to get on a plane. I mean, it's crazy to think about the impact. And so that's really the point, is helping companies think about and being thoughtful about transparency, choice, and following through on their commitments.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And one of the things I would add to that we've seen, and I'd be curious to hear your perspective too on this, is one of the things that we've recently started to, I'll say, come to the market with a point of view around is what we're calling privacy customer experience, right? Or privacy consumer experience. And to your point, to sort of nail down that further thread on that, transparency and control and choice, right? I think, it goes back to privacy historically has been very much a legalese exercise, and therefore companies have approached it in sort of that legal, sort of mindset. How many of us are familiar with, every time we go to click on or register for a new product or service, we go and click the I accept button on the notice, which is, pages and pages of legal, documentation, which even as privacy professionals, I'm sure neither one of us read every time we sign up for a new product or service, right? Because it's not a good experience. And at that point, you've already decided you're wanting to, use that product or service. And at that point, you've already, agreed that you're just going to give whatever data away. I think there's a big opportunity there, right, within that sort of context, to be able to provide a better, more approachable privacy experience to the consumers that are more real-time, sort of in experience, if you will, that are providing a bit of a more of a story in that short form, to allow them to say, do you want to use this? We need to use this particular type of data for this particular, application, if you will, meaning we're going to, by opting into this or not opting out, right, of this particular use, then it's going to provide you this value in exchange, right? That whole value exchange proposition that's not really front and center and very approachable for consumers today. Say, if you allow me to have this data or use this data, collect and use it, then I'm going to provide a better, more personalized experience for you, which means this, and this. And a consumer may be much more inclined to say, oh, that makes a lot of sense to me. Of course, I want you to have a recommendations engine to make suggestions to me as to which movie I should watch based on a history of others. That makes a ton of sense. Of course, I want to opt into that, right? So that is a missing ingredient I see, as far as where technology and customer experience can play a major role in sort of helping to bridge that trust gap. And I know you all have your preference and consent management platform to support some of that as well. But I'm curious if that's something that you tend to agree with, or you see as an opportunity to sort of help bridge that gap a bit as well.
Yeah, I've heard you and PwC speak about the privacy user experience before, and it is a spot on vision for what customers are trying to achieve. And the key about the privacy user experience is that everybody wins. The consumer, the business, and the marketing teams win. When you think about trust, privacy, security, governance as just a compliance function, everybody kind of loses, because you have some legal text to the consumer, they don't understand it. Your marketing team is upset because they can't collect enough data anymore, and the company didn't differentiate. It's a lose, lose, lose. When you think about it as a user experience, let's use the example of this cookie banner thing, right? It's like this, this is what everybody talks about. And you put a cookie banner on a website, it's a horrible way to get consent for data, because you haven't earned it yet. To your point, the value exchange, I think was the word you used, isn't there. Right. And so many companies are obsessing over getting consent on the cookie banner so they can personalize it. I would say forget about it. You have to do it because of compliance. So just make it easy to decline if they're not ready to accept it. That's okay.
Right.
But how you can differentiate is what you said, the user experience. Think about the flow of how they're visiting your website. Which page are they spending a lot of time on? And then pop something up or put something in line that says, hey, it looks like you're browsing this article. Here are other interesting articles that we can personalize next time you visit this page if you consent to this specific part of data collection. That's now clear for the end user. They're getting value of personalization. You're getting that data collected, and the company wins, marketing wins, compliance wins. That's the difference between user experience and compliance.
Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, totally agree. We're 100% aligned, obviously, on that topic, which I agree is it's just an area there that I think there's tremendous opportunity to help with this broader bridging of this trust gap, and I think that's one of the many areas that can help with that. So maybe to pivoting to another question. So earlier today, one of my partners, Brian Fox, he came on and gave an introduction to the identity and privacy sort of session or work stream today for the Fintech conference. He talked a little bit about how cross-functional teams, and is really important to guide and develop companies' data and their data trust strategy. I'm just curious, does this sort of does this align with what you're seeing at your customers as you go to talk to them about different technology solutions to help them with their trust journeys?
This is a fundamental major problem in enterprise environments today, is that they have a separate operational program for information security, for privacy, for their GRC, for their risk. Here's the problem, 3 of them. 1, you're re-entering data in 3 different tools. All of those tools need to know your list of your IT systems, your business initiatives, and now you have 4 different sources of truth that are out of sync. They're all out of date now, not just one out of date. The second is the user experience for the end consumer is horrible. You go to a website and you see a different cookie preference, different whistleblowing, different security certification, different bug bounty. It's like nobody knows the difference between this stuff. Like it's just overwhelming. And the third is that company will never be able to get the real value out of all of the information in those different platforms, because unless you have a consistent platform and data model, you can't run AI and predictions off of it. And so this is the big change we're seeing in the market, is cross-functional teams, single platforms, and each team can have their own slice of the platform, but it's got to come together for that user experience.
Yeah, no, I think you and you and I have had many conversations about this over the years, and I think that's why I got excited when you all announced the acquisition of Integris, right, to help with some of that dynamic data discovery capabilities to stitch that together, because what we were seeing in the market was very much this sort of this pivot or this trend that there was a convergence across what we were seeing around this swivel chair approach for security, for privacy, and then for data management, but there was nothing really there to stitch those together and help them sort of think about data as an asset and data as a risk from a risk management compliance perspective all together in sort of unison. And so I think to your point, it's something that we're seeing more and more, that our clients are starting to realize that you can't really just deal with these in a silo and try to manage them in a silo and really get what you're looking for from a risk management, compliance, and value creation perspective, unless you better stitch those parts of your program and business together. So last question, Kabir. I think just wanted, I think we've got time for one more. We can kind of get in before the end of the session here. But one of the questions that we generally or regularly get, I'd say, from clients, particularly when you start talking about these sort of emerging and maybe I'll call it squishier, concepts like trust, right? And is how do I actually, or how do you think companies should go about actually measuring that success, right? So can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the sort of KPIs or metrics that you've seen, or that OneTrust provides that could actually help companies as they sort of think about, actually measuring the effectiveness of their trust strategies?
Yeah, I think this is such an exciting area that there's a lot of innovation around, because in the past, it was all about capacity metrics. I did this many risk assessments. I spent this much time, getting this certification. And now it's really about, how do you measure the value and the increase to the business? And so things like, how did we increase our ability to personalize? Because we built these user journeys and it actually increased the amount of data we could collect. we actually sped up our sales cycle by X amount because by getting this security certification, it allowed us to reduce the time to negotiate a security and privacy addendum in a contract, tenfold. You can measure customer satisfaction scores because a lot of privacy and trust and ethics is external facing. You have whistleblowing forms, you have privacy forms on your website. And when people submit a support ticket, you measure the CSAT score. Why not measure the CSAT score when you submit a privacy security trust ticket? All of those things can start building the story about the value and trust you're providing to the business.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I think we're right at time. So Kabir, just again, want to just say thank you for the time. Always a pleasure, my friend. And also just thank the individuals in the virtual audience that joined us today. Really appreciate you all joining us and look forward to more conversations in the future.
Thanks, Toby. Bye, everyone.